Kicking off this week's pregame show ahead of Vanderbilt and Tennessee with Joey Dwyer. One final pregame show. I guess I'll put one out for the bowl game, Joey. That'd probably be fun. But rivalry week, Thanksgiving week. With Joey and I are on the road, on the move, but we're still bringing the pregame show to you. Joey, we'll both be there, whether we're getting it back in town Friday or not. But it's going to be really interesting. I don't. You've never covered a Vanderbilt Tennessee matchup quite like this, and maybe outside of baseball, but like the stakes in this matchup, I think are what separate it from really any time these two teams have played. I mean, this is the first year of the 12-team playoff. I think that in and of itself, Joey, is what has people excited about this, and Pavia and Vanderbilt and what they've done this year is a part of that. But what Vanderbilt has the opportunity to do is what I think makes the anticipation so big for this game.
Yeah, I mean, Vandy's got the chance to play spoiler this weekend, and I don't know if they've had a chance to do that a whole lot against Tennessee. Tennessee has not had a season quite like this with the stakes like this in the last season in a long time, or in the last game of the season in a long time. Vandy could legitimately be the difference between them making the college football playoff and not. And I think if you're a Vanderbilt fan, that's a pretty exciting possibility. I don't think this one matters as much for Vanderbilt or even close to it, but I do think it does matter with how this regular season is perceived. If you have wins over Virginia Tech, Alabama, and Tennessee, it's a lot different than just having 6 wins. So there's some things on the line for Vanderbilt as well. I think the consensus is the offense has gotten figured out a little bit, and this team is kind of regressing to the mean. And if Vanderbilt goes in and beats a Tennessee team that has college football playoff aspirations, I think all that talk goes out the window. So really big week for Vanderbilt just to kind of see where it's at this point of the season, and more so with this chance to play spoiler. Billy, before I hand it back to you, I'm going to address the elephant in the room. I don't believe I've got a haircut since the first pregame show of the year, so that's why it looks like this. We'll be ready to go for Saturday.
Good, thank goodness. We'll get a fresh Dwyer haircut ahead of Vandy, Tennessee.
I'll be a new man.
Brand new man. Yeah, I don't know if Chris was going to accept it. But no, Joe, let's get in the matchup. It's really there's a lot of interesting matchups within this game I'm looking forward to watching. I think my favorite and the most anticipated matchup here is Tennessee's linebackers, because they struggled in coverage against 3 Georgia tight ends against Vanderbilt's tight ends, and really just Vanderbilt's offense. Like, how can Vanderbilt expose Tennessee's linebackers the way Georgia did? And can they? Is that something that, that's what Georgia schemed up and they did that because they're Georgia? Or can Stowers have a day? Can we see a couple of big catches from Spence? Can you put Alexander one-on-one at a linebacker? Does Sherrill end up one-on-one with one of the linebackers because they're young? I think his name is Will Brooks. He's made some big plays for Tennessee this year, and but they've struggled in coverage. They struggled in coverage against Georgia. And Arian Carter, again, a young freshman from the mid-state, is going up against some good tight ends, and that's tough as a freshman. So that's what I'm looking for, Joey. We didn't see a ton of Stowers or Spence against LSU, and I just wonder, and I know Stowers is likely banged up, but very peculiar. The week before Tennessee, you don't really see any. You saw 2 targets to Stowers, and I wonder if they have a lot queued up for him against Tennessee.
I think how Vanderbilt's able to handle Tennessee's front 7 as a whole is going to really determine a lot of this game. If Vanderbilt's not able to run the ball with Cedric Alexander or A.J. Newberry, could be in trouble if they're not able to distribute the ball to Eli Stowers and Cole Spence, especially Eli Stowers. They could be in trouble as well. So I think a lot rides on whether they're able to get that going, because that's kind of how their offense has flowed the whole year. In the last couple of weeks, that's been taken away from them. Stowers, I think, is probably going to be bracketed for a lot of the game. Alexander's probably going to have a hard time finding holes. If Vanderbilt can move the ball at all through those guys' hands, I think they've got a chance. But over the last couple of weeks, you've seen teams kind of make Vanderbilt beat them by throwing it down the field, and that hasn't really been Vanderbilt's game. I think you're probably going to see Tennessee try to do that to Vanderbilt again this week. And if they can't get Alexander involved with going between the tackles, and if they can't get Stowers the ball consistently, I think you could see this be a different game than maybe Vanderbilt fans are hoping for.
Another matchup, Joey, which this could very well decide the game. Vanderbilt's defensive line against Tennessee's offensive line. Vanderbilt got no pressure on Nussmeier whatsoever. Nussmeier had all day His PFF grade showed it, and he was good. I think it's one thing to have time and have open guys, but you got to make the throws. You got to step up in the pocket. You got to avoid pressure. Vanderbilt had a couple of sack opportunities on him. He avoided the pressure. Nico can do the same, but Nico's also a redshirt freshman.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the way Nico and Tennessee's offensive line handle Vanderbilt's defensive line and what the Vanderbilt's defensive line tries to do could say a lot about how this game goes, because if Vanderbilt doesn't get pressure, if they're not making Nico uncomfortable, I don't think they have a shot. If they do, it gets interesting. But the defensive line, they've got to be better than they were against LSU. You cannot come up with 0 sacks. But that's also, how many pressures do they send? How aggressive is Clark Lee on Saturday with a young quarterback who it's probably the coldest game he's ever played in? It's early. Interesting atmosphere, right? I mean, it just feels a little bit different when SEC teams come to First Bank Stadium. It's just kind of a different feel. How does Nico handle that? But this defensive line has to be better, Joey, and I think that's another matchup that will tell a lot in this game.
Yeah, the performance against LSU will not cut it against Tennessee, and it didn't cut it against LSU. Vanderbilt's corners are not good enough to be left on an island for 8 to 10 seconds, right? And I think that's going to be what determines a lot of how Tennessee is able to throw the ball. Nico, I think, is good in the right situation. And if Vanderbilt puts him in the right situation, which they put Garrett Nussmeier last week, they're going to have a really difficult time getting stops and consistently getting off the field, especially with Tennessee's run game, which I think is one of the better ones in the league and one that Vanderbilt's going to have some real trouble with, to be quite frank with you. They've got to be able to hold, and I just wonder how that defensive line holds up against Tennessee's offensive line because, man, I'm still kind of struggling to find a playmaker there. Cordy Sinder's done it in spurts. Issa Wataha's done it in spurts, but they need somebody to come out and have kind of an uncharacteristic performance. And you saw it. Nick Rinaldi had a 4-game span where he was awesome coming off the edge. You saw Cordy Sinder do some good things against some good teams, but Vanderbilt's going to have everybody step up this week on the defensive line, not only in terms of getting pressure, but also holding their gaps in the run game. And Billy, it's something we've talked about at length, is their tackling's got to be way better than it has been. It was really poor against LSU, and it was poor the week before that against South Carolina too. That's got to be an improvement this week. They got to be a little more sound on the perimeter, and their guys can't be put in one-on-one situations like they have been.
All right. Lastly here, what Vanderbilt wins this game, what happens? I think that's something, because I don't know that I'd have a great answer for that. And maybe you don't, but in your mind, Joey, if Vanderbilt wins this game, what happens on Saturday night, on Saturday morning, actually?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the same blueprint that they've put together, but I wonder if it has to be modified a little bit because of how teams have kind of figured them out. I guess my instinct is to say they've got to control the ball. They got to put together long touchdown drives and not settle for field goals. They got to avoid the turnover. I think in terms of where their offense is right now, it has to be a little different. It has to be force a turnover, maybe score off that turnover, maybe force 2 turnovers, avoid any turnovers at all offensively. And when you have a drive going, you've got to finish that drive. I think it has to be more like the Alabama performance than the Auburn and Kentucky performances. Tennessee's really good, and Tennessee knows what it's playing for. I think the book is out on Vanderbilt, not only in terms of what it's going to do in terms of its schematics, but also in terms of it being a good team. I think nobody is coming in looking over Vanderbilt at this point after what it's done throughout the early part of the year, and I certainly don't think Tennessee is going to do that with a college football playoff berth on the line. I do think Vanderbilt's going to get up and be ready for this game. I just wondered, is it healthy enough, and does it have enough in the tank offensively to be able to win a game like this? I think Tennessee's defensive line, probably the best Vanderbilt's seen to this point, and I know we've gotten flack for saying that about a lot of teams Vanderbilt's played, but I mean, this group is the real deal. And I think Vanderbilt has to find a way to run the ball. I'm not sure that I'm optimistic that they can do that. But Diego Pavi's got to be able to use his legs. We'll see what percent he is going into the game. He's talking today on Tuesday, actually. This show's going up, or show's getting filmed way earlier than normal. But the path is getting a little bit harder for me to see when it comes to Vanderbilt beating Tennessee. A few weeks ago, I thought they could beat Tennessee, but they just seem so worn down right now. And there's got to be some new life injected in this team throughout the week, whether that be through the downfield passing game, whether that be through turnovers. They've got to have a couple energizer plays to make up for maybe their health not being on the level that we thought it was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, but Vanderbilt's going to have to buck a trend, Joey. Right? I mean, the trend has been when they play a team that can run the football and play good defense, it just hasn't been good. And I think of that South Carolina game. South Carolina is built like Tennessee. They have a great running back, a quarterback that's younger but can run, can avoid the pressure. So as much as fans probably don't want to hear this on the Vanderbilt side, I could see a scenario where this sort of gets out of hand a little bit. Not to where it's completely out of reach, but I could see that. But I could also see Vanderbilt keeping this thing close and competing, and certainly that's exactly what Vanderbilt fans want. How about Clark Lee's quote on Commodore Hour? He's it's definitely as loose as we've seen him, and of course he'll be speaking today as we record this, so we'll have that coverage. But Joey, bundle up, man. It's not just quarter zip weather on Saturday. It's heavy jacket weather.
Yeah, we're gonna have to buck a trend, Billy.
I love it. Not just Vanderbilt, but Joey and I are going to have to buck trends. We'll see if there's cupcakes this week. But Joey, good to talk, and I'll see you Saturday.
Saturday in Nashville is going to be a bad day to be a cupcake, Billy.
Langston, I want to start with the LSU game last week. The Tigers, 474 total yards of offense. They were really successful on third downs, 8 of 13. Maybe not what went wrong for you guys, but what was it that LSU offensively was able to do, specifically through the air, that gave you guys some problems?
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of athletic playmakers, and they did a good job getting them out in space. Special tackles are probably the hardest thing in college football. So the whole goal of the game is pretty much to get your athletes out in space, and they were able to do that with good offense and good concepts and a good game plan coming in. And so we just lacked finishing those tackles, those shallows, and eventually it ended up hurting us.
What do the tackling issues come down to? You mentioned it's so hard to tackle. I mean, these are SEC level players in space, but are there other things that some of the tackling issues might come down to for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's good on good. Those players are paid to make us miss. I mean, they're good athletes. Some of those players that we played last week are the best we've seen so far this year, and breaking tackles and stuff like that. So it's all about just closing the space, really, and in doing that, you got to have the right leverage and the right angles. And our ankles were off some Saturday, and just when we're tackling, not leaving our feet, that ended up hurting us a lot. Just diving out at the ankles hurt us in the South Carolina game too. And just continue to work on that throughout the week of practice. Just staying on our feet and run through the tackles.
Big week for the entire state, for you guys as a program, of course. Obviously, under Coach Heupel hasn't gone particularly well, but you mentioned that your dad played at Alabama. Your household has not been the biggest fans of Tennessee growing up. What does this rivalry mean to you, and how excited are you for Saturday to have them come to First Bank Stadium and have a chance to potentially really spoil their season?
Yeah, for them it's a playoff game. I mean, they lose, they're out. So, and for us, we're trying to finish off getting the best bowl game we can and put leave all the chips on the table. So really, in that sense, this game is a playoff game for both teams, and just trying to extend your season. It's huge. You can already feel the excitement and how the coaches turned it up this morning and in practice, and just kind of the excitement and energy around this game. Because if they don't come on with the same excitement and energy that we have, they're going to be shocked right out of the gate. So both teams just got to come in, and really the grittier team and whoever wants it more is going to come out on top.
Langston, I'm interested defensively. In the past, Tennessee has been able to establish the run, and you get to the fourth quarter and maybe some tired legs, especially with some of the running backs they've had. What have been the issues defending Tennessee in the past in your mind, especially with playing them last season? What have Josh Heupel offenses given? In what areas have they given Vanderbilt's defense some problems?
Yeah, their offense is almost like a triple option offense. Like, it's something that you have to prepare for and put in, different play. You see everyone come out with a new game plan, and, nobody's really running their base stuff because Tennessee's offense is like nobody else's. So really it's really different. Part of their game plan is just grinding you down, snapping it with 30 seconds left on the clock, making sure that everyone's lined up and in the right place before the play takes a snap is one of the most important parts. they do a good job. They take away your ability to disguise stuff, your ability to do some stunts just with how fast they do their offense. So just being really dialed into what we need to do. Just today we repped it in practice, just like the ball was downed and you're sprinting to get lined up because the next play is coming. With a team like Tempo like that, you got to have those legs under you. And when they sub someone out, you gotta have people coming in and get fresh legs in, because at the end they try to grind you out. And what you see with their rushing yards, it comes in the third and the fourth quarter when some of those teams are grinded down.
You mentioned fresh legs, and obviously that's what everybody likes to talk about late in the season. Everybody's dealing with bangs and bruises. How are you feeling, and in terms of fresh legs, and how do you feel like the defense is feeling, especially with the last game of the season? And does it, with it being the last game of the season, are you able to put some of the bangs and bruises aside and say, hey, let's do it one more game, even though you guys do have a bowl game?
Yeah, this is a game that everyone lays it out on the table. For some of those teams that are reaching for the playoffs, it may not be as much like that, as it's just like another week that you got to go through. But, especially because we probably won't play for, 3-4 weeks. So it's a game that everyone's laying it out on the table. Do what you got to do to be right by Saturday, because when that game comes around, everyone will be fresh and 100%. And, yeah, it is game 11, game 12, but you got to put all the chips on the table.
All right, last thing here. What are the biggest keys for you guys defensively, maintaining and really containing Tennessee's offense and not letting that rushing attack get loose, especially into the fourth quarter?
Yeah, it's what you said. We can't let the rushing attack get to us, because the rush opens up the pass, and that's how it goes for them. So as long as we, are able to build that run wall and not let them kind of grind us down through the run and not let the tempo get to us, we'll put them in some third and long situations that they won't want to be in. If you're just going 3 and out, the tempo is going to have to change, or else they're just giving us the ball back. We're a manage the clock kind of offense. So, if you're just giving the ball back to our offense, we're dangerous with the ball in our hands. And you saw it in the Bama game. When we control possession, we control the game.
Should be fun. That's Langston Patterson, local product, Vanderbilt-Tennessee, coming up Saturday. Langston, good luck, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Billy.
Ryan, I want to start with the fan mood right now heading into this one. I think I like to go back to 2 years ago. Tennessee was coming off of the South Carolina loss, and playoff contention was gone. Hendon Hooker was hurt. And there was maybe some pensiveness. I know Vanderbilt fans had a little bit more confidence heading into that one, but that ended up being really ugly, 56-0. So coming into this one, how would you gauge how Tennessee fans feel and how confident they are heading to Nashville?
Yeah, I do. It's a good point with the game 2 years ago, because obviously the end result you don't think about it. I do think there was some concern from some Tennessee people going in with having just lost the week before South Carolina out of the college football playoff race, Joe Milton starting, and Vanderbilt obviously playing better. I guess it was Florida and Kentucky they'd beaten a couple weeks prior. But the mood was just completely different because, one, Tennessee was out of the playoffs. So it's like, you want to win the game still. Obviously,
right.
You want to, salvage a good season. But there was a sense that, Tennessee accomplishing anything, beyond what they already had at that point wasn't really there. And then the fact that even with Joe Milton, that team could just score a lot of points, and you felt pretty confident that Tennessee would be able to line up and at least run the ball really well and hit a couple of deep plays and score a lot of points. This year, I think that tense would be the best word to describe how the fan base feels going into this game. Obviously, Vanderbilt's been better the entire year. They really, South Carolina game, about the only game they've gotten truly blown out in. They've been in just about every game. And I think you combine that with an offense that is nothing like it was 2 years ago, that has struggled to have success against at least every SEC team on its schedule. And then you add the stakes of if Tennessee wins, they'll be in the playoffs, outside chance of hosting a playoff game. I think everybody in the Tennessee fan base is very, very tense heading into this game. And I think everybody expects Tennessee to win, but they don't feel like it's just an absolute given either.
Why has the offense struggled at times? And you mentioned it's been so different than what we were used to with Josh Heupel offenses. I know last year was different, of course, than a couple of years ago. But Is it Nico? Is it the offensive line, or is it a combination of a lot for Josh Heupel this year offensively?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a cop out, but it really does feel like it's just a combination of a lot of different things. And really just quarterback, receiver, and offensive line, they're much worse than they were 2 years ago at all those spots. I lean towards receiver being where the biggest difference is. And that, they weren't great at receiver last year either, but it just feels like they got a lot of number 3 receivers, a lot of solid number 3 receivers and no true difference makers. And they haven't been able to connect on many deep plays. And look, that goes both ways. Nico's missed some throws. He missed 2 throws in the first half or the first quarter to UTEP game last week that there would have been long plays and not touchdowns. Receivers have dropped passes when they've been open, and Nico has made good throws. It just seems like they've never been able to get on the same page in the pass game as a whole, but particularly in those chunk plays, because that's what made Heupel's offense so good in 21 and 22. And without that, there's just not a lot of explosivity in this Tennessee offense. The run game's good, but not just a ton of chunk plays there either. And it feels like they got to string a lot together to have good things happen.
With this matchup, do you think it's as simple as Dylan Sampson having a good day and Tennessee's defense playing the way they know they can? Or do you think this is a game that Nico also has to step up, and obviously he can't turn over the football, but is it as simple as Sampson has a good day and the defense plays really well, they win the game?
I think those two things happen. Tennessee probably does win the game, but it's going to be really close if that happens. Tennessee's not going to win with a lot of comfort if they just lean on the run game and play solid defense. I think for Tennessee to win this game comfortably, to cover the point spread, which to me seems a little bit high. I think it's right around 11 or 12. They're going to have to make some explosive plays in the passing game, and they're going to have to move the sticks on 3rd and long, which they've been good on 3rd and short, 3rd and intermediate, but 3rd and long they've not been very good, and that's where some of the offensive line issues have come into play too. So I think Nico's going to have to make some plays for Tennessee to win comfortably. Can they lean on the run game? Can they just play good defense and potentially win this game? Yeah, probably. I mean, they've largely won just about all 6 of their SEC games this year playing that strategy. So I think it's possible, but it doesn't give them a whole lot of room for error on other stuff if that's how they try to play this and how they try to win.
You've been able to talk to Heupel and the assistant coaches throughout this week. What are they keying on the most with this Vanderbilt team? Is it all Diego Pavia, or are there some other things that this Tennessee team obviously has to be wary of heading into Saturday?
I think Diego Pavia is a big part of it, just because of he's just such a gamer. You can't really plan for him, scheme for him, scout him, like you do all that stuff, but that only gets you so far. And I think that anytime you have a player like that, a quarterback like that, that's going to give a defensive coordinator and coaches in general cause for concern going into the game. So I think that's a big one. Tennessee being able to contain him, get him on the ground when they do have pressure, because I do think Tennessee will be able to pressure Pavia in this game, but not letting him get away and make plays off script is a lot easier said than done than just getting back there. So I think that's a big one. Not that Tennessee's coaches have talked a ton about it this week, but Eli Stowers, I think, had that pronunciation right. Georgia 2 weeks ago just gashed Tennessee with its tight ends. And Tennessee's corners have been really good this year and have been, I think, there was some, at least for myself, some excitement because they had 2 sophomores they were going to start that I was pretty high on going in the year. Both those guys have been good. So the pass defense has been better than it's been at any point under Heupel. But the safeties are a little shaky in the coverage. The linebackers are very shaky in coverage, especially since they lost Keenan Peely for the year with a torn ACL. So Georgia's really the only team we've seen truly exploit that to this point in the year. And with Stowers, it feels like Vanderbilt could be another one that could take advantage of some mismatches over the middle.
I want to talk about Nico. I don't think he's played in a game that's going to be this cold. Sounds like it's going to be in the upper 30s, low 40s. Early kickoff, playing in a kind of a weird environment where you probably own the stadium with your fan base. How do you think Nico handles that? Because it's kind of a unique situation for him with a ton of pressure on this program that he has the keys to.
It's a good question, and one I'm uncertain of, I guess, to say. The one thing I do think that does bode pretty well for Tennessee is that they're a morning practice team. So they practice at at 8 a.m., 8 to 9 a.m. when they start practice every day. So I don't think the early morning start should be a problem. I think there's actually a good bit of relief. I mean, it's Tennessee's first road game all year that has not been in the 7:30 slot or game away from home. The game against North Carolina State and Charlotte was in that way too. And I think Tennessee's glad to just get up and play and not have to sit around and wait all day. But with Nico, I mean, the cold, it's obviously something you wonder about for a kid from Southern California. It was pretty cold at Georgia 2 weeks ago, not as cold as it's supposed to be on Saturday in Nashville. But, his numbers weren't great, but I thought he himself played pretty well in that game and wasn't a whole lot going on well around him. So I don't really know what to anticipate for him. It felt like he really had been moving in the right direction if you date back to the second half of the Alabama game. I thought he had continually played better and better since then. And then last week in the first quarter, he was really bad against UTEP. I mean, he missed some easy throws that he has to make. And look, he bounced back after that. But again, it was UTEP. So, you don't take much good that happens from UTEP, and you kind of magnify anything bad that happens. So I'll be curious to see. I do think he's played better over the course of the year. I don't think he's had a ton of help around him, but he also certainly hasn't been perfect at times. And, I do think a road environment that won't be as daunting as some of the other ones Tennessee's played in certainly bodes well for Nico and Tennessee's offense as a whole. It's kind of been a theme that they've struggled in over the years.
All right, last thing, if Vanderbilt wins this game on Saturday, in your mind, what happens? What are some things that will have happened in the game that made Vanderbilt beat Tennessee in your mind?
Well, I think the one that really stands out to me is Vanderbilt's offense having a lot of success on third down. I mean, it's a Vanderbilt team that is largely, ball control from what I've been able to tell this week has been pretty solid on third downs. And look, Tennessee's defense has been really good on third downs this year, with the caveat of the Georgia game 2 weeks ago when they got off the field on the first 3 third downs of the game, and then Georgia converted, I believe, 8 of 11 from that point on. So I think that's a big aspect. Tennessee's defense is really good at not giving up chunk plays. I don't think Vanderbilt's really going to be able to exploit them there. Most teams they've played haven't. So getting off the field on third downs, I think, will be big. And then the other one that I'm really curious, feels good on good to me, is how good Vanderbilt's red zone offense has been this year and balanced it is. The amount of, I think it's 28 red zone touchdowns and right around even rushing passing, which, gives Tennessee a lot of concern. And most teams that they've played that have been good in the red zone have just been able to run it, and Tennessee's run defense has been able to slow them down. So I'm curious about that. And then on the other end, I think it's as much as being good inside or in the scoring range, 35 on. Maybe not as simple as red zone, but when Tennessee's offense was truly sputtering at its worst in the middle of the season, and they had the scoreless first half against Arkansas, and then against Alabama and Florida, and they scored, I think, maybe 3 or maybe 7 in the first half against Kentucky. Outside of the Arkansas game, they moved the ball fine in all those games. So they got down to the 30-yard line. They got down to the 35-yard line, and they couldn't score. They turned it over. Dylan Sampson had 3 straight games where he fumbled inside the red zone. Max Gilbert missed some kicks. Tennessee would get in field goal range, have holding calls that would push them out of field goal range. So I say all to say the back half of the season for an offense that's still flawed, they've moved the ball pretty well. But they haven't been able to score a lot of points because they haven't been able to be efficient when they got in scoring range. If that continues, if Vanderbilt, in what I expect to be a little bit of a shorter or a lower possession game, can get some holds in scoring range, force Tennessee to kick field goals, get a couple turnovers. Again, that's where you start talking about the margin for error for Tennessee getting a lot smaller. And Vanderbilt certainly is a team that I think is fully capable of stealing a low-scoring, close game, and a team that everybody listening would probably know better than me, but a team that seems to have a lot of confidence and play well in close games.
It's going to be interesting. Should be fun Saturday at 11 a.m. kick on ABC. That's Ryan Schumpert from RockyTopInsider.com. Ryan, thank you for taking the time and enjoy the game Saturday.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on.